This video has been brought to you by Final Fantasy VII: The First Soldier. Download today to dive into the first RPG-infused battle royale from the Final Fantasy series. Can you become the first soldier? What is good, Final Fantasy fans, Kingdom Hearts fans, Square Enix fans? We are celebrating a lot this year when it comes to, of course, the Kingdom Hearts 20th anniversary and the Final Fantasy 35th anniversary. And when it comes to these two series that have obviously been linked together and the prospect of Kingdom Hearts 4, Vane or a Quadratum Yozora based game, we have to ponder the question about Final Fantasy in Kingdom Hearts in Phase 2. Because of course, in base Kingdom Hearts 3, we had a very, and I mean extremely minimal Final Fantasy presence. But that was fixed thanks to fan feedback for Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind, and what seems to be the goal of Tetsuya Nomura moving forward. So we're going to be talking about the possibilities of Final Fantasy coming back in a very big way in Kingdom Hearts 4, a Quadratum game, a Yozora game, or anything of the sort, because I feel there could be a very grand avenue to be explored in this new realm of fiction, unreality. So if you're down with that, be sure to like, share, and most importantly subscribe to HMK for more awesome Kingdom Hearts videos. Now, the biggest thing about this is that Yozora, the concept of Quadratum, Vane, all that good jazz, you know, Nomura can say whatever he wants, but it's plain to see, time and time again, as time passes, that Vane is indeed based on the original vision, interpretation of Final Fantasy Versus 13, which went on to become Final Fantasy 15 with Noctis, Insomnia, all that good jazz. We can see it from Space Nomura even before that of the Remind endings. It was juicy. And then when thinking about Quadratum and what we see from the Vane trailer, it seems that this area of unreality is going to be a lot more technologically focused. You know, it's going to be based on the future rather than just magic. It's gonna have magi technology, but you know, Kingdom Hearts has always been very quirky, very loose in terms of its, you know, mystical lore. But in Quadratum, it seems that, you know, technology is king. And in that aspect, there are a lot of Final Fantasy games that have technologically based focuses, such as Final Fantasy Versus 13, which of course Insomnia was based on modern day Tokyo, Shibuya, Shinjuku, all that good jazz. And we're seeing that way more blatantly with Vane with Shibuya. It's still called Shibuya even though it's called Quadratum. And of course Shinjuku with the buildings of the Shibuya Hikari, which, you know, the 20th anniversary event is happening there. The 104 building and the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building, which of course the castle in Insomnia is based on. Now, other Final Fantasy aspects that we can expect for Vane or Kingdom Hearts 4 anything in Quadratum is obviously summons, because Rex makes that very clear when we play Kingdom Hearts 3, that when he's playing Vane, that the Bahamut boss was giving him a lot of trouble, and Bahamut, as we all know, is a very extremely famous Final Fantasy summon. So at the very least, it seems that, you know, we're gonna get summons back in Kingdom Hearts that are going to be focused on Final Fantasy. And the reason why I say that is because Bahamut apparently was originally supposed to be a summon in Kingdom Hearts 1, and then I got scrapped. It's time. Yozora or Sora summoning Bahamut. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be grand. And you know, considering that this is the 35th anniversary of Final Fantasy, along with the 20th anniversary of Kingdom Hearts, the stars seem to be aligning for a bit of a reveal or confirmation this year that Final Fantasy is going to be playing a, not I would say bigger role in Kingdom Hearts, but just more expanded from what we've seen in games like Birth by Sleep, Dream Drop Distance, Kingdom Hearts 3, where the Final Fantasy, if they were there, was pretty minimal and whatnot, but I feel it's going to be, you know, maximized considering that Yozora, the identity of Yozora is going to be so big on the concept of Final Fantasy Versus 13. And another thing that I feel is really cool and really possible, and I made a specific video on this a while back when it comes to Cloud possibly returning in Quadratum, is that Final Fantasy VII might have a big presence in this new realm of unreality, especially how we last left Cloud and Sephiroth from Kingdom Hearts 2, of them disappearing, going to a new realm to finish their fight and whatnot, and we haven't seen them since. It could be possible that they went to Quadratum. I have a video on that. You can check it out in the description box below. But of course, not only Cloud, but Tifa being the physical representation of Cloud's light, that's the lore within Kingdom Hearts. And I feel that Barret might have a very big role in Quadratum, being originally from Quadratum, and then Cloud and Tifa come into contact with him, and then they make their own Kingdom Hearts version of Avalanche, and then they're gonna go off and destroy areas that are Gigas manufacture plants. And then another step that I want to go forward in that is that I feel Sephiroth is going to try to be on the run in order to recoup his strength to be strong enough to go against Cloud's light, because he seemed very scared when Tifa was giving Cloud her light, and then he's like, oh man, oh no, okay, we're gonna have to backtrack a little bit, I'm gonna have to get a little stronger. So he might be in some sort of stasis and then have others do the fighting for him. If you guys know what I'm laying down here, yes, I feel there is a big opportunity to bring in Kadaj, Yazo, and Laz in Quadratum as the remnants of Sephiroth. The Silverhead Men, let's go. Please, that would be such a cool way to put them in Kingdom Hearts. And then Cloud and Tifa and Barret and Sora and Yozora may have to deal with them. And then once you're done with that arc within the game, they all come back. Well, I should say, like, the way Aventura went is that, specifically Kadaj merged with the remnants of Jenova and was able to, reawaken Sephiroth and blah, 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 blah. But I feel like in Kingdom Hearts, they're just like, okay, we're ready. Fuse all three of them back into Sephiroth because, Jenova, I don't know about Jenova being a thing. Because Genova's not a thing. Like, Sephiroth's the physical representation of Cloud's darkness, so... yeah. But, speaking of Final Fantasy VII...
defend your honor and become the first of Shinra's elite in Final Fantasy VII, The First Soldier. Set 30 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII, experience the first RPG-infused Battle Royale entry in the Final Fantasy series. Explore the expansive, familiar setting of Midgard using spells, weapons, and special abilities as you overwhelm your opponents in this highly varied, high-octane strategic combat. In one of the most robust battle royales I ever played, you could be an all-around warrior, a sorcerer with expanded magic. Maybe sneaking around as a ninja is more your style. Dispatch your enemies at a distance as a ranger, or bring the fight to them as a monk. Level up your skills and upgrade your equipment in real time as you take to the battlefield, fighting both your opponents and monsters in order to gain XP. From creative director Tetsuya Nomura, learn the secrets behind the beginning of Shinra's Elite Soldier program. Download today on your mobile device using the link in the description box below. I already racked up a couple of wins in this free-to-download, free-to-play Battle Royale, so the competition is gonna be fierce. Can you become history's first soldier? If you think so, then I'll see you in Final Fantasy VII, The First Soldier.
And then when we're talking about more possibilities of technologically based or future-based Final Fantasy games, and then the fact that Yozora is obviously based on Final Fantasy Verse 13, we have to talk about Final Fantasy 13. I know a lot of people are divided on the game's concept, lore, story, gameplay, whatever. I enjoyed 13, okay, listen. And I would love characters like Lightning and Snow specifically to be in Quadratum, to be in Kingdom Hearts 4, Yozora-based game, whatever. Specifically for like their strong ties to the sea, the Fall Sea, which seems to be a thing thanks to one of the endings in Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind, with Sora achieving his focus. So those two specifically, sure, if you want to bring in more, that'd be great, but I don't want like too many chefs in the kitchen, too many cooks in the pot or whatever. Nah, but honestly, the more the merrier if you want to bring in more people, but specifically Lightning and Snow, right? And I would love for them to tackle more concepts from Fabula Nova Crystallis, which of course is the compilation that is a shared mythos of the crystal between that of Final Fantasy Verse 13, Final Fantasy 13, and the next game that I want to try and bring up, because I don't know, I'm not sure if this will make it, but Final Fantasy Type 0, right? That is part of the Fabula Nova Crystallis series. And a lot of people are thinking like, what about Type 0 in Quadratum or in Kingdom Hearts? I don't know about that because that game was rated M for mature for a reason. Yeah, that game is pretty violent, pretty bloody, and pretty, dark and stuff. The game was really built around, showing off the harsh realities of war and other concepts. But, we're dealing with Gigases and, Yozora's a commander and, that's, and the Keyblade War. So if they were to readapt concepts from Final Fantasy Type 0 in order to have the characters and some parts of their lore within that of Kingdom Hearts or Quadratum game, they could do it. Because, I mean, like, all Final Fantasy games have their own level of wildness to them, right? And yet we still have the characters in there. We've seen Zack, we've seen Auron, Cloud, Sephiroth, you know, Aerith was there. It's just that, you know, readapting in order to keep the feel there, but, you know, make it approachable for those playing from the Disney side of things, because that's what Kingdom Hearts is. You know, even if we're going into Quadratum or whatnot. But, you know, the one thing I would like to see definitely from Final Fantasy to go into Quadratum and whatnot, even though it is technologically based and whatnot, you know, we don't need no horses, right? We don't need no horses. We need chocobos. And, you know, Yozora had the chocobo thing on his zipper. You know, chocobos. Come on, like, we haven't seen a chocobo. We've seen Moogles, but chocobos. Kingdom Hearts, come on, chocobos. What are you waiting for? But honestly, I could go on and on about all the aspects of Final Fantasy being a thing within Quadratum, because I feel that a lot of aspects that weren't explored previously in Kingdom Hearts from Final Fantasy's aspects or whatnot, he was like, Nomura was just waiting for the right opportunity and the right playground in order to mess around with those characters to not make them feel so out of place in Kingdom Hearts. And Quadratum is just like Candyland for all the, you know, modern day versions of Final Fantasy, because of course before Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy was dealing with more olden times or whatnot, and Final Fantasy 6 was the last one before they decided to go back and forth, but 7 was really the start of the introduction of the modern setting day Final Fantasy, you know, stuff. And Quadratum is literally the best place to explore those avenues once again in bigger ways than we've seen in Kingdom Hearts. And I'm really excited for the possibilities I have for a Final Fantasy. So if you're down for that, please like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to HMK for more Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy videos. And big thanks to Square Enix for sponsoring the video. Be sure to download Final Fantasy VII, The First Soldier today. Now, one thing that a lot of people are probably going to be asking in the comment section is that, but HMK, what about The World Ends With You? Neo The World Ends With You. So I would, you know, talk about that, but I haven't beaten Neo yet.
So you haven't subscribed to HMK yet? Don't piss Xemnas off.